On Monday, you got your copy of Opinion. Yes, Pluto is a planet. We spent time going through and looking for word gaps and domain-specific words, which you should have highlighted in two different colors. And then after doing the revision of our Sparta Athens essay on Tuesday, I told you to go through and read and look for big questions. And so we're going to go through kind of briefly what I found to be big questions. And if you didn't take any notes on this, then I would strongly advise that you did that as we went. There are going to be some places where I have notes already and some places where I didn't. So you'll have to do those on your own. But you do have a quiz over this article on Friday. And so I would strongly advise that you make sure you know the topic very well by taking the time to annotate it. So the three big questions look at asking, what did the author think I already knew? And we mark those with question marks. What are things that we don't understand that the author wrote about or that we still have questions about? So those we're going to mark with a question mark and explain. What surprised me? So we're going to mark those with an exclamation point. Anything that we didn't know that is surprising to learn. And then the what challenged, changed, or confirmed what I knew, I think of those as the big ideas. Things that we already knew that the author confirmed because they're important, or things that we maybe didn't know because they're different than what we thought we knew. So within this first paragraph, I'm going to read 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to share my annotations with you. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union, or IAU, announced a new definition of the word planet. With this sweeping action, the fascinating world of Pluto was demoted, meaning it would no longer be officially considered a planet. We think this decision was flawed. Pluto is a planet. Why do we say this? We are planetary scientists, meaning we've spent our careers studying objects that orbit or travel around stars. We see a world like Pluto, with its mountains of ice, glaciers of nitrogen, a blue sky with layers of smog. Naturally, we find ourselves using the word planet to describe it and compare it to other planets. So I know that this is the beginning of an essay, and we've talked about essay writing, and I thought, what does the author use as his hook? And if we look back at when this was written, it was not written in 2018. So in 2006 is a lot more recent to when it was written. And this is interesting news. Whether you are a scientist or not, people have a very strong opinion about Pluto. And so this made headlines, and it was just a very important thing that, maybe not important thing, but an interesting thing that affected a lot of people's opinions. So the author used that knowledge to begin his essay. And then I also wanted to think about, well, what is this author's point? He does write in first person here, we, which I tend to tell you should not be done. And I think that the author's doing this to personalize it a little bit. We're going to find that as he writes, it was an opinion piece. He's got very, very strong opinions. And what is he trying to prove? His thesis is here. Pluto is a planet, regardless of what the IAU said. So what I'd like for you to do is take a second in paragraph 3. If you don't have any type of annotation here, there was something in paragraph 3 that surprised me. So I could absolutely put an exclamation point here and think of something surprising to explain. And I also had a question after I read this. So I want you to pause the screencast and make sure you have something written for paragraph number 3. Paragraph 4. Moons orbit around other worlds, which themselves orbit our star. Saturn's Titan is technically a moon. Still, it's larger than the planet Mercury and has mountains, dunes and canyons, rivers, lakes, and clouds. Often you will find scientists like us calling it a planet. This usage is not a mistake. It's accurate. So I found two different things here. And I know this is one paragraph, but I had two annotations here. First of all, this confirmed what I knew. I am not, again, a scientist, but it confirmed that I knew that moons orbit around other planets. What it challenged was that I had never thought about thinking of a moon as a planet. Here they talk about Saturn's Titan as a planet as well because it has landforms and bodies of water, which makes sense but it's just not something I'd ever thought about before. So take a second. If there's something else that you found interesting or have a question about, go ahead and add your own annotation here. Most essentially, planetary worlds are those large enough to have pulled themselves into a ball. The reason is their own gravity is strong, which can then push and shape the planet into being round. Below a certain size, the gravity is not strong enough to shape a planet this way, so the smallest worlds, like asteroids and icy comets, are lumpy. Soon, the spacecraft New Horizons will deliver quality images of the furthest world we've ever seen, a place called Ultima Thule. We know that this world is not a planet for a few reasons. Okay. I want you to take a second right now, pause the screencast, and go ahead and annotate paragraphs 5 and 6 with something that you found either interesting, something that you have a question about, or what's the main idea of the paragraph? What do you think was important? One of the things I put down was that I was surprised. And again, not knowing much about science, I really never thought about what makes a planet round. And so I never thought about the idea that the gravity had to be strong enough that it pulled it together into that shape. And I never really thought about why asteroids and comets are lumpy versus planets being round. So that was a surprise to me. I also had a question. When it talked about here this Ultima Thule, where is this furthest place? And how are they getting this spacecraft there to even see it if it's so far away? It sounds like it's got to be further away than Pluto, but where exactly is it? Now, if you were to go into my article of the week, I find things like this interesting, and I actually found an article about Ultima Thule. And so if you're interested in this, you can go to my website, click on my version of the article, and there's a link there that'll take you there. 7, 8, and 9. For one, it's tiny, just 17 miles across, and distinctly not a sphere. These physical reasons separate planets from icy comets or rocky asteroids. The desire to reconsider the meaning of planet arose because of two thrilling discoveries about our universe. The first is there are many, many planets beyond our solar system called exoplanets, orbiting nearly every star we see in the sky. In addition, there are many small, icy objects orbiting our sun, out further at Pluto's distance. In light of these discoveries, it made sense to ask, which objects discovered orbiting other stars should be considered planets? Some of the largest objects are more like stars themselves. Okay, so I want you to pause the screencast, take a second, go back and do your big question annotations for 7, 8, and 9, and then continue on, and I'll share mine with you. So I said a big idea was the planet definition changed, and they changed it based on two discoveries. So I think it's important for us to take note of those. The first was that exoplanets are planets that are outside of our solar system. So there are other solar systems in the universe, and exoplanets are the ones orbiting in those solar systems. And the second was that there are objects that orbit our sun further than Pluto, but it doesn't sound like they're round objects. They describe them as icy objects, which also makes me wonder, is this what they're going to check out with that in that last paragraph, the Thule, whatever that link was. Also, how does this mean that Pluto isn't a planet? So if this idea changed, what does that have to do with Pluto? Now you'll see that there's a new heading here. So use these headings as you read to think about a main idea for this section of paragraphs. Stars like our sun are known as dwarf stars and still considered stars. As a result, it made some sense to consider small icy worlds like Pluto to occupy another group of planets, dwarf planets. However, the process for redefining planet was widely criticized, even by those who accepted the outcome. The decision came at the end of the 2006 IAU conference, and the decision was confirmed by a small group of scientists remaining. The definition was drawn hastily and contains obvious flaws. For one thing, it defines a planet as an object orbiting around our sun. This then disqualifies the planets around other stars, ignoring the idea of exoplanets. It declares that essentially all the planets in the universe are not, in fact, planets. Pause the screencast, go ahead and make your annotations, and when you continue, you can see mine. So I put a question here. Dwarf stars are small stars, and dwarf planets are small planets. So is that what they're saying, that Pluto, or why they're saying Pluto, it would be considered a dwarf planet? The question I have at this point is still, why make the change? What's the difference? Because Pluto hasn't changed very much over, the world, the history of the world. So why are they so intent on making this change? Paragraph 12. Even within our solar system, the IAU scientists defined planet in a strange way. They declared that if an orbiting world has cleared its zone or thrown its weight around enough to eject all of the other nearby objects, it's a planet. Otherwise, it's not. This rule is imprecise, but what's worse is that they chose a definition that discounts the actual physical properties of a potential planet. Instead, they chose to define planet in terms of the other objects that are or are not orbiting nearby. Go ahead and pause the screencast while you make your annotation. From this point on, I want you to go ahead. I'm going to read it to you, but you're going to finish up doing your own annotations. If you'd prefer to do it on your own, you can pause the screencast. But again, every paragraph should have something important that you're going to make an annotation of. This leads to many odd conclusions. For example, it would mean that Earth was not a planet for its first 500 million years of history. Until that time, Earth orbited among a swarm of debris. Also, it would mean if you moved Earth somewhere else, like the asteroid belt, it would cease being a planet. Worse, they amended their murky definition with the confusing statement that a dwarf planet is not a planet. This seemingly served no purpose, but to satisfy those motivated by a desire to ensure that Pluto was demoted by the new definition. Oops, don't look at this. It seems very likely that at some point the IAU will reconsider its flawed definition. In the meantime, people will keep referring to the planets being discovered around other stars as planets, and we'll keep referring to the round objects in our solar system and elsewhere as planets. Eventually, official definitions will catch up to both common sense and scientific usage. Words are not defined by voting, neither are scientific ideas. Okay, so you should have, by the time you see me tomorrow, all of your paragraphs annotated with something that you found to be important or some questions or surprises. We will go on to the next screencast to look at the signposts for your third read.